Hello, hello, Awesome Soul here, and we knew they were coming, but the balance changes have finally dropped, I guess technically yesterday by the time this video will go up, but still, I will go through them and give my thoughts on them, as I usually tend to do. First off, I know I usually get a lot of questions about, oh, what bot is this, what's the name, where can I buy it, that sort of thing. Of course, it's under my name, and this bot is the Pinpoint. So you can search it up on the store, or just search my in-game name, that works as well. So this is actually taking advantage of the brand new changes, or at least one of the new changes, and that is the increased fire rate to the smaller railguns. But to start things off, I will go through the beginning of the patch notes, at least on page 1. Yes, there are 2 pages. There were actually 2 balance change updates, because I think they failed to fix something the first time. But anyways, I guess I will jump right into it. So, all crystal health has been doubled. So a lot of these changes seem to be aimed at getting rid of the whole tower rush and base rushing mechanics. They're not even really mechanics, they're just sort of, I don't know what to call them, but basically before, I'm sure you've noticed that a lot of people can just easily recapture towers or just easily rush your base, take out 1-2 seams, and you're now crippled for pretty much the rest of the game. You need someone to defend base, but that usually doesn't happen. But anyways, the next change is owning towers now gives you 33% protonium rather than 50%. The number of towers captured in Battle Arena now have less effect on the protonium escalator. 3 towers captured now double protonium instead of tripling it. 2 towers are 1.66 times instead of 2 times, and 1 tower is 1.33 instead of 1 times. So actually, the one thing that was buffed is having 1 tower. So I guess you could kind of come back. If you're just down to 1 tower, you could get somebody to sneak into the base. But if you're constantly at 1 tower, that usually means somebody has left the game or disconnected or something like that. And losing at least 1 person in Robocraft is usually a death sentence. So this might help, but I don't know how much it's going to help. In addition to all that, the amount of protonium gained over time has been decreased by 2.5 times. So I believe you got 1% protonium every second? That's just what I'm remembering off the top of my head. I could be completely wrong, but it seemed like the protonium was going up very quickly. And now, that's a pretty big nerf. I don't know if this is going to make Battle Arena games last too long, but we will have to see. I haven't actually had a chance to test out Battle Arena yet. Something else they've also hinted at is the weapon energy curve has been changed. So the CPU to energy curve is now slightly steeper. So 1000-ish CPU bots now have around 10% less energy than they used to have. So for those that don't know, the way that the whole energy to CPU thing was calculated, it wasn't a flat increase. Basically, if you were in the 1000-ish range, you had an advantage over everything else, so that's good. The other thing that they've also talked about is the plasma maximum fire rate reduction. And that was brought to us today, so now it's 1.2 seconds between shots as opposed to 1.12 seconds. Other than that though, damage and energy cost, as well as splash damage presumably, they didn't talk about that in the patch notes, but I haven't noticed an increase. They haven't changed at all, so really it's just the fire rate, which is good because plasma, at least on aircraft, was a little bit ridiculous. It's not the biggest reduction, it's not like a crazy burst now, but it's still like a considerable fire rate to this thing. So is it going to be enough? I don't know, only time will tell. If you have any experience playing as a plasma user, or I guess taking the full force of a plasma drone, let me know what you think of those changes, because as well, I haven't really had a chance to test out plasma too much. So something that was a bit of a nerf, even though in the end it still technically is a buff from what it used to be, the EMP stun effect. This is just the stun effect, not the deploy time. The stun effect is down to 5.5 seconds, which originally was 7.5 seconds. Or at least before these changes, but before that change, ever since the EMP was originally introduced, it was 5 seconds. So again, in the end, this is still technically a buff of 0.5 seconds. But at least in my opinion, the main buff, or at least the main point of the buff to the EMP, was the deploy time, and that has remained the same at 2 seconds. Both of the ions, the distorter and the destabilizer, have had their energy cost per shot reduced by 20%. I have tested it out on the Daybreaker. Before, it usually got about 4 shots before it ran out of power, but now it gets about 6. So, decent buff. Don't know if it's going to be exactly what they need. Maybe they need a bit more, or just really some other kind of changes. More damage, less damage drop-off, I don't know. Next up, we have something that is pretty interesting, and I'm sure, well, all of you will be happy about this. The power module has its cooldown reduced to 60 seconds, as opposed to 120 seconds. So 1 minute as opposed to 2 minutes. So it's a pretty considerable nerf. Will it be useful? Yeah, I can see it being useful now. Although modules usually have around 30 to 40 seconds, but I understand why this is a 60-second module, because all of those other modules not only have a cooldown, but they cost power. This one actually gives you power. So it makes sense why it's so high still. I don't think it really needs to go any lower than 60, but again, we just have to wait and see. Let me know what you guys think about that. Aeroflak stacks now accumulate 1.5 seconds as opposed to 1 second. Everything else about the weapon has stayed the same though. Tesla protonivity, basically how powerful it is against towers, has been reduced by 25%. So Teslas were already pretty bad at taking out towers. So this is basically just the nail in the coffin. If you're a main Tesla user, go off and get some kills, let everyone else take the towers, as it really should be. Chain Shredder protonivity has also been reduced by 20%. So if I have the story right, this thing was an absolute monster for taking out towers. It would make sense that you could just get a super low CPU chain shredder bot, get maybe a blink or escorted by someone else, get into their base and just shred all of their connection points, and then you win. So a 20% reduction, that's fine by me. Obviously, you'd want to have backups to your chain shredder. You never really want to go full chain shredder. At least that's how I use my chain shredder setup. So you can use your other weapons to take out towers and keep your chain shredders for the enemy. Now this is something I have wanted for quite a while, and it's definitely made a pretty big impact in game, I've noticed. Robots now explode, aka die, when they have 10% of their total CPU remaining, as opposed to 25%. So for those of you who are new or new-ish to the game, the health bar that you have, when your health bar hit 0, that was 25% of your CPU remaining. But now when your health bar hits 0, that means you have 10% of your CPU remaining. So this basically means everything is a lot more tanky and harder to kill, which I am all for, because this is a pretty big-ish buff to tanky bots, because it's percentage-wise. So if you're super small and low CPU, you're going to have less health in that percentage than a larger bot. So I guess this is kind of a buff. I have heard people saying that the maximum CPU range is a little underpowered, so hopefully this will provide a needed buff to that. The last thing is, of course, what you've been seeing throughout this video, the increased fire rate. I have been using the Piercer, which is the smallest one, and now that has a fire cooldown of 0.375 as opposed to 0.75, which was the same across the board for all of them. So as I'm sure you are aware, basically anything other than the Eraser, the largest one, was completely and utterly unviable and really just didn't have much of a point to use it. Now, they are actually good in their own sort of special way. The Piercer is it's not a spray and pray weapon. I was going to kind of call it that, but I have used it to do that and just basically held the trigger down. It was way too inaccurate. So you do have to really concentrate if you want to be able to land all of your shots, but that increased fire rate is definitely a good thing. When it comes to the Eraser though, it is still better at picking off parts, because you deal a single burst to a single target. Usually a laser will pretty much pop off if you've shot it with an Eraser, whereas the Piercer, it takes a bit more shots. So you just have to constantly hit the same spot over and over and over again, which can be pretty difficult when you're facing moving targets. But it's good, because now you can actually fire fairly fast. Decently fast. But yeah, all in all, I would say that it's a much needed buff. I don't think it's overpowered. You've probably seen throughout the video I've been wrecking shop, but I have had other matches where this thing gets completely and utterly decimated. The piercers are not very good against tanky bots. The piercer is, at least what it seems to be, is more of an anti-mid-range weapon, because it's kind of hard to hit small CPU bots with this thing, because again, it's a highly accurate weapon. So when it comes to the mid-range, that seems to be where this thing shines, at least taking out those kind of bots. But yeah, give me your thoughts on the rail changes. I would love to hear them, and well, really anything else in this update, let me know. I, of course, have been the Awesome Soul. I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.